We might all sit here and disagree as to whether or not ONSD was eliminated or whether they sought to leave itself. But I believe that if they put money in, they should get the money out. It's their money. Bottom line, okay? And there shouldn't be any real discussion or clarification. It should be clear. It's their money. Give them the money back. I don't think that there should be any question about that.
Any other? Would you like to make a motion with some language that just indicates something simple, Wayne, that we can take forward as an approval?
Yeah, I believe the language should be that that any LEA that happens to leave is entitled to all monies that they have contributed.
What about on the last sentence, when instead of saying will not, just take out the not, would be entitled?
That's what I would like to offer, is a motion that would just strike the word not in that third paragraph on the top of each one. It's a motion to approve for the exception of striking that word.
Okay, so on this item E3, we have a motion for approval with that change. There's questions?
I'm not sure that that necessarily is clear language. Is our intent that the reserve amount that is returned is going to be in proportion to?
Right. Maybe we can make it sound like their proportionate share.
Right, the proportionate share based upon their ADA, the year of withdrawal.
Yeah, I think that would be the intent, just a weighted capacity based on our contribution, whatever the date would be. So
if we have dipped below the required reserve amount, is it a proportionate amount regardless of what's left?
well, you're talking about, okay, again, this is where I get confused, so forgive me for not having a complete understanding. We're talking about three funding streams here, three pots, for lack of a better term, correct? So which pot are we talking about? The $500 pot?
Correct.
I'm looking at.
Yes.
Okay. So
Tim was going to say something, so I.
okay. So why would that be? How does that equate to zero if we fall below? What threshold do we fall below? Then it equates to zero. I don't understand that.
There's every likelihood this year from discussions with Tim that we will not be able to realize the reserve that we have typically held and that we've agreed that we will hold in the X pot because of the increased expenses and the increased litigation. So there's a chance there will not be that $500,000 reserve. So I'm just saying perhaps we want to address.
Is there a forecast of what that might be?
Tim?
Probably half of that, 250 grand.
So in that hypothetical scenario, it would be like what Sean was doing, it would be proportionate to 250, not 500. It would be 20% of that number as opposed to the first. I don't think it would be zero.
So just to clarify what Sean's language, I think what the council would like it to read would be, the last sentence would say the withdrawn and terminated LEA will be entitled to its proportionate share of the reserve amounts based on ADA as of the effective date of the termination. Is that, you worded it a little better than I did, I believe.
Well, I was thinking their ADA as the year of withdrawal.
Okay. Based on their ADA as of the year of withdrawal.
P1, P2.
P2.
Can I ask a question? If the reserves fall below 500 and the rest of the districts have to pony up to make up that 500 for the 16-17 fiscal year, which Ontario Montclair is still a portion of, that's a little confusing, because if we have to bring the reserve back up to 500, the existing districts, of which Montclair is a part of, do we just take the balance of that and proportion that out? What about the balance that needs to be made up? So that's a little more confusing, because all districts are responsible to keep the balance at 500 of the existing districts. So if you leave and all the other districts have to come up with that 500,000, and you're gonna take a portion of the 250, I'm not sure how that's gonna work.
And I think you're talking about 500 for the 17-18 year where we're not,
Well, the 500 has to be at the end of the year, I believe.
right, and so whatever that tally is, let's say it's 380 or 400, or in this case 250, we would be entitled to 20% of that number. And then the obligation to maintain a $500,000 level for 17-18 would be on the 9 districts here.
Well, the way the policy and the finance portion is written is that if the reserve falls below, districts will be billed in the following year to make up that 500 for 16-17 expenses. So does that release, that's all I'm asking is, does that release Ontario Montclair of that obligation? So I think that's a little bit more complicated, so maybe you have to think about that since it's new territory.
I know what you're saying. I mean, we can go 2 ways about it. We could fully replenish the 500,000 with all 10 districts and then divvy it up back their proportionate share of the 500,000, or we could just divvy up what's left and then come up with a new reserve amount with the 9 remaining districts the following school year.
So what is our reserve balance based on P2?
We don't know until year end. Normally, we're over 500,000, but this year with the X5
At P2, will be below?
at year end, it's not really P2, it's as of June 30th, we'll figure out what kind of balance we have in the X5.
But that's different than what you said, because when James asked a clarifying question, it'd be based on the P2 amount. So how do you determine the P2 amount?
The P2 portion of it was how to figure out their proportionate share of the funds based on P288.
Okay.
And I guess to kind of piggyback a little bit on the question that was presented. This $500,000 is forecasted to be below the 500, correct?
Correct.
So what is the purpose of the 180 reserve? To help supplement that, or is that?
It's a totally different pot.
Okay. And is that 180 in jeopardy of being forecasted to be below the 1%?
No, it's the opposite.
So we're really talking about one of the 2 pots. We're really talking about the bigger of the 2 pots here.
Exactly.
Okay.
But you've contributed to both, right?
Correct. Correct. But I think the question was, if I understood it correctly, and I don't know if I did, is if it falls below the policy threshold, which is 500, where does the obligation lie to get it back to 500?
Well, what makes sense to me is that you would get your portion of whatever it is at the time that you terminate, and then all the other districts would be responsible for
Right. So it'd be
replenishing it.
Yeah, and so going back to Superintendent Justin, it'd be June 30th, and whatever that number is in June 30th, we would have a proportionate percentage based on ADA
Yeah,
for reimbursement. That's how I understood it.
I just think what Carolyn was pointing out was if we fall below the reserve, Ontario Montclair is part of the reason, as are all the districts, that we are below the reserve. So normally, if you fall below the reserve, all the districts will contribute enough to get you back to the reserve. So I think she's just pointing out that in this case, if we're below the reserve, I guess it doesn't matter too much, but basically, normally every district would put in money to get you back to the reserve based on ADA.
And maybe you can argue that $500,000 should be revisited since you're going from 10 to 9. I don't know. It kind of depends on your usage and your anticipated frequency of usage, how you forecast that. But you're kind of, I guess you need to decide if it is the pleasure of the council to allow us to be entitled to the dollars that we've contributed to. At what point? Is it after the hole gets filled or while the hole is half full?
And I can't make a motion, so that would be up to you.
But I would like to just reiterate the motion that's been presented to motion to approve as written for the exception of the word "not" in the 3rd paragraph on top of B20 as it pertains to LEA entitlement for reserve amounts.
So there's a motion on item E3 for approval with the adjustment of taking out the word "not."
And also including the proportionate share based on ADA, correct?
Would you like that detail? I mean, I'm happy to add that detail. I think Sean was asking the intent, but I'm happy to redo the motion with that detail, that level of
So
detail.
do we have a motion currently? I made a motion to add that language? Okay.
Okay, then I can second it, Sean.
Okay, yes, I would like that language in there, but I don't think I actually made a motion to.
You wanna make your
I'm just asking
motion?
a question. So, if you want to make the motion.
I'll try. Okay. So I would like to motion that, so strike my initial motion. My new motion is to approve, is this technically a plan?
Fiscal allocation.
To approve the fiscal allocation plan as noted, for the exception of a revised statement on the third paragraph on top of B20 that articulates the entitlement of the LEA to get a reimbursement of the reserve amounts predicated on proportionate value, termination date, and balance of the reserve accounts in question.
Is that based upon 88 P2?
Yeah, well, he said June 30th, so P2 I think is in May or April or so, March. So, I mean, yeah, I think it just assumes that if it's, our termination date is June 30th, but yes, P2, correct.
I second.
Okay, any further?
I would like to ask a question to Tim. Would we have a more accurate number on June 30th of what the balance of that pot is versus P2?
It probably takes us a month to close the books, so somewhere around the end of July.
So, I would suggest that we get the most accurate dollar amount we can, which sounds like it would be based on the June 30th, which we won't have that information for probably another week, but it's still based on June 30th closing date instead of P2. So it would be, the withdrawal terminating district will be entitled to its proportionate share of the reserve amounts as determined on June 30th.
I think there's a little bit of confusion. So the proportionate share that we're using is determined by P288. That's just to come up with the percentage of what each district will receive. The date of June 30th is just our year-end closing where we can calculate how much is left. So the P288 is just to come up with, in this case, Ontario Montclair's percentage of what's left as of June 30th. Hopefully that clarifies everything for everybody.
So on June 30th, you'll be using 88P2 as a part of the calculation?
Correct. It takes us a little bit after June 30th to figure it out.
But bottom line is you're still using 88P2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd like to add also that I like the idea of adjusting down the reserve amount once OMSD is gone. It seems to make sense. And also, I do support the amendment here, but I still will be voting no because I do not agree with the structure of the act. So I want to make that clarification.
Okay, so there's a motion, there's a second. Tim, do you have a motion? Do you understand the motion?
I do, yes.
The factors.
Okay, I got it.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, thank you. So that moves us into item E4. There are two cards in this loop.
Thank you. Well, this item talks about the XPOT, and I'm glad to hear the robust discussion because as members of the public, we don't have access to all the information that you do. And I mean, I was astounded to hear the level of confusion that transpired. These slush funds, which that's what the XPOT is, were not even considered under the PPIC report. I had an opportunity to talk to their staff and mention that in their report, they actually didn't look into these slush funds and how these pots of money are being used. During the hearing on AB 312, I was really sickened to hear how the school districts and WESELPAs throughout the state were parading parents, in one case a mother of a Down syndrome child, to come in and beg for money, another African American mother to come in and beg for money, for more money, or this equalization of the funding, which translates into more money for the SELPAs. And it was just, you know, disgusting to see how the SELPA parades these parents in to use them when it serves their purpose, but yet at the IEP meetings, they're being told if you want an IEE, you need to take us to due process. Now, one of the things that the PPIC mentioned was that the state's enactment of the local control funding formula in 2013 consolidated most state categorical programs into district-based grants in order to move decision-making to the local level. However, special education was preserved as California's largest remaining categorical grant, operating mostly outside LCFF governance framework. And that's why you have this confusion, this system that there's no accountability. Even the staff people don't understand how it works. And only special ed was left out. I was told that at one point, the English language learners were going to be taken out, but then it was decided to bring them back in. And only the special ed population was taken out. The task force that was convened, they wanted a system of a unified system in which general education and special education were part of a, quote, seamless program of student services. Right now, we don't have that level of accountability. And I think that's where you get the ability of an agency to run a pot of money. It's a blank check to the agency, and then use their own discretion, and there's no rules or limitations, and just do whatever they want with these large pots of money. And it's the district's money. That's why we support the PPIC recommendations of funding districts directly. It is your money. It is not the SELPA money. How is it that, you know, a district that contributed to the X pot and contributed that money all of a sudden won't have access to it? Thank you.
Thank you. We have another card, Mr. Palmer.
I appreciated the history that was given here, but I noticed that this increase this year of $3.61 is a huge jump in an increase that we haven't seen for the last several years, as you see here. It's just been, you know, one year there was a reduction, every other year was a few cents increase. Now you have an increase of $3.61. It's much, much larger than it was before. And we're moving into a year that you have one less school district who has a large amount of students that aren't going to be here. So I'm really confused why this is the projection. I mean, what pattern do we see here, and what's going on that we're not understanding, or we're not have our eyes open to, that this is the amount of projection that's being made into next year that they need. Again, you know, my position would be educate, not litigate. You know, this money could be much better used in the classroom, supporting the teachers, supporting the students, and providing the right services to children to help them progress. Instead, we're, you know, we're putting into a money pot. And listening to the exchange about the X pot, you know, just brings up the question I talked about of the laundering of money. I mean, we're just passing money around, and and the accountability and the understanding of how it's being spent is not adequate. So as a member of the community, I'm very concerned. Also on here, you know, not only does this X-Pot increase account for a 2% COLA, it also deals with PERS and STIRS, and my understanding of those are also benefit to employees, and in the amounts of 15.8% and 14.43% respectively. So all of this money that's going back they want more money in the X-Pot is to line their pocketbooks, not to help our children. I've seen this pattern time and time again, and I bring it to your attention, but yet you're going to vote on it right now and say, yeah, I'm going to give you $3.61 more per child to go into this X pot, this slush fund. So I would hope, watching all that's gone on, and see that you're waking up to the